For thousands of years, Zeus has been remembered as the mighty king of Olympus, the god of thunder, the ruler of the heavens, the protector of order and justice. To the ancient Greeks, he was the most powerful being in existence. His lightning could shatter mountains. His voice could shake the skies. Even the gods themselves bowed before his authority. But that is only part of the story. Behind the golden throne of Olympus lies a far darker truth. A truth filled with betrayal, fear, cruelty, and absolute power. Zeus was celebrated as a hero because he overthrew a tyrant and freed the universe from oppression. Yet as the centuries passed, many began to wonder whether the king of Olympus had become the very thing he once fought against. He punished enemies with unimaginable suffering. He ruled through fear as much as respect, and countless lives, both mortal and divine, were forever changed by his decisions. Was Zeus truly the noble protector described in ancient legends? Or was he one of the most dangerous figures in all of Greek mythology? To uncover the answer, we must travel back to a time before Olympus existed, a time when the universe itself was ruled by monsters, titans, and forces older than the gods. This is the dark story of Zeus. Long before Zeus ruled from the heights of Olympus, there was no king of the gods. There was no Olympus, no thunder, no lightning, no order, only chaos. In Greek mythology, chaos was not simply disorder. It was the vast emptiness that existed before the universe itself, an endless void stretching beyond imagination. From this emptiness emerged the first primordial beings. Among them was Gaia, the earth itself. Gaia was not merely a goddess of the earth. She was the earth. Every mountain, every valley, every stone and forest existed as part of her being. But Gaia was alone, so she created Uranus, the sky. Together, Gaia and Uranus became the first great rulers of existence. The heavens stretched above, the earth spread below, and from their union came a new generation of powerful beings known as the Titans. The Titans were immense, ancient, and unimaginably powerful. Among them were Oceanus, Hyperion, Zeus, Cryus, Iapetus, and the youngest of them all, Cronus. But the Titans were not the only children born to Gaia and Uranus. There were others, creatures so strange and terrifying that even their own father feared them. The Cyclopes, giant beings with a single eye, and the Centaurans, monstrous giants with 100 hands and 50 heads. These beings possessed incredible strength, but their appearance filled Uranus with dread. Terrified that his children might one day challenge his authority, Uranus committed an act that would forever change the fate of the universe. Rather than allowing them to live freely, he imprisoned them deep within Gaia herself, buried in the darkest depths of the earth, hidden away where no light could reach them. For Gaia, the pain was unbearable. Her own children had become prisoners, and their suffering echoed through her body like a wound that could never heal. As her anger grew, so did her desire for revenge. Gaia called upon her Titan children and begged them to rise against their father. Most were too afraid. Uranus ruled the heavens. His power seemed absolute. Only one Titan dared to answer her call. Cronus, the youngest Titan, ambitious, ruthless, and hungry for power. Gaia forged a great sickle of unbreakable stone and placed it in Cronus and Olympus' hands. Then she waited. One night, when Uranus descended from the heavens to lie beside Gaia, Cronus emerged from hiding. With a single violent strike, he attacked his father. The sky god fell, and the age of Uranus came to an end. For the first time, a ruler of the universe had been overthrown by his own child. Cronus became the new king of creation. The Titans inherited control of the cosmos. And for a brief moment, it seemed as though justice had finally prevailed. But the victory carried a terrible price. As Uranus lay defeated, he spoke words that would echo across the ages. A curse, a prophecy. Just as Cronus had betrayed his father, one day his own child would betray him. One day, he too would be cast down from power. Those words planted a seed of fear deep within Cronus and Olympus' heart. A fear that would grow stronger with every passing year. A fear that would eventually drive him to commit acts even more terrible than those of his father. And from that fear, the story of Zeus would begin. Cronus had defeated his father. He ruled the universe. The Titans obeyed him. And for a time, he believed the prophecy had been defeated. But prophecies are difficult things to escape. The words of Uranus haunted him, day after day, year after year, like a shadow that never disappeared. One day, Cronus took his sister, Rhea, as his queen. Together, they would become the parents of a new generation of divine beings. For most rulers, the birth of a child would have been a moment of joy. For Cronus, it was a nightmare. Every child represented a possible threat. Every newborn reminded him of the prophecy. Every cry sounded like the beginning of his downfall. And so, when their first child was born, Cronus made a horrifying decision. The child was Hestia, a goddess destined to become one of the most respected figures in Olympus. But she never had the chance to experience childhood. The moment she was born, Cronus seized her and swallowed her whole. Rhea was horrified, yet there was nothing she could do. Cronus was king of the universe. No one dared challenge him. Then came a second child, Demeter. Cronus swallowed her as well. A third, Hera, swallowed. A fourth, Hades, swallowed. A fifth, Poseidon, swallowed. One after another, the children vanished into the darkness of their father and Olympus' body. Cronus believed he had found the perfect solution. If his children never grew up, they could never overthrow him. If they remained trapped forever, the prophecy could never come true. At least, that was what he told himself. But every child he consumed drove Rhea deeper into despair. She watched her family disappear before her eyes. She listened to the silence that followed each birth. And she knew that if nothing changed, her next child would suffer the same fate. When she became pregnant once more, Rhea sought help from Gaia, the ancient Earth Mother. Gaia had witnessed generations of rulers rise and fall. She understood the danger of fear-driven power, and she devised a plan. When the child was born, Rhea would hide him. Cronus would receive something else instead. Far from the eyes of the Titan king, Rhea gave birth to a son. His name was Zeus. Unlike his brothers and sisters, Zeus would not be delivered into Cronus and Olympus' hands. Immediately after his birth, Rhea carried the infant away. According to ancient legends, she traveled to the island of Crete. There, hidden among caves and mountains, Zeus would be raised in secret. To complete the deception, Rhea wrapped a large stone in blankets and presented it to Cronus as if it were the newborn child. Consumed by paranoia and fear, Cronus never looked closely. Without hesitation, he swallowed the stone, believing he had once again defeated destiny. But destiny had already escaped him. While Cronus sat upon his throne, convinced that his power was secure, the child who would one day destroy his empire was growing stronger. Deep within the caves of Crete, Zeus was hidden from the eyes of the Titans. Ancient stories tell of magical nymphs who cared for him. Others speak of the divine goat Amalthea, whose milk nourished the young god. Some legends even claim that armed warriors known as the Cruelties guarded the cave. Whenever Zeus cried, they crashed their shields and weapons together, drowning out the sound so that Cronus would never hear his son and Olympus' voice. Every day Zeus survived was a victory against fate. Every year he remained hidden brought the prophecy closer to fulfillment. The king of the Titans believed he had escaped the future. In reality, the future was waiting for him, growing stronger, learning, preparing. And one day, the child hidden in darkness would emerge to challenge the most powerful ruler the universe had ever known. The age of Cronus was nearing its end, and the age of Zeus was about to begin. For years, Zeus remained hidden from the eyes of Cronus. Far from the palaces of the Titans, the young god grew stronger. The child who had once been helpless was becoming something far more dangerous. A challenger, a warrior, a force capable of changing the fate of the universe. Yet Zeus understood one important truth. He could not defeat Cronus alone. The Titan king ruled an empire that stretched across all creation. The Titans controlled the heavens, the seas, and the earth itself. Their power had remained unchallenged for generations. If Zeus wanted to overthrow his father, he would first need allies. And so, according to ancient myths, Zeus returned from hiding and set his plan into motion. His first objective was to free his imprisoned brothers and sisters, the very gods Cronus had swallowed years before. Through trickery and divine wisdom, Zeus forced Cronus to consume a magical potion. Moments later, the impossible happened. Cronus began to convulse. His body shook violently, and one by one, the children he had swallowed were released. First came the stone that Rhea had used to deceive him. Then Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. For the first time in their existence, the children of Cronus stood together as free beings, united by a common enemy, their father. But even with his siblings beside him, Zeus still lacked the strength needed to defeat the Titans. The war ahead would determine the future of the cosmos itself. Then Zeus made a decision that would change everything. Deep beneath the earth, in the dark prison of Tartarus, two powerful races remained trapped: the Cyclopes and the Centaurs. Long ago, Uranus had imprisoned them. Cronus had continued their suffering. For countless ages, they had remained forgotten in darkness. Zeus descended into the abyss and offered them something neither Uranus nor Cronus had ever given: freedom. In return, they pledged their loyalty to him. It was a decision that would alter the balance of power forever. The Cyclopes were master craftsmen. They forged weapons unlike anything the universe had ever seen. For Zeus, they created the thunderbolt, a weapon capable of tearing apart mountains and splitting the heavens. For Poseidon, they forged the mighty Trident. For Hades, they created the Helm of Darkness, a legendary artifact that granted invisibility. Armed with these gifts, the young gods prepared for war. The conflict that followed became known as the Titanomachy, a war so vast that ancient storytellers struggled to describe it. For 10 years, the universe trembled. Titan fought against God. Mountain crashed against mountain. The oceans boiled. The skies burned with lightning. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage. The Titans were ancient and powerful, but Zeus and his allies fought with determination and purpose. As the years passed, the struggle grew more violent. Entire landscapes were shattered. The heavens echoed with endless battle. Creation itself seemed on the verge of collapse. Then came the final confrontation. Zeus unleashed the full power of his thunderbolts. The Centaurs hurled enormous boulders across the battlefield. The Cyclopes fought beside the Olympians. Together, they overwhelmed the Titans. One after another, the old rulers fell. The empire of Cronus crumbled. The prophecy that had haunted him for so long had finally come true. Just as Cronus had overthrown Uranus, Zeus overthrew Cronus. The cycle repeated itself. The son defeated the father. The king became the prisoner. The ruler became the fallen. When the war finally ended, the victorious gods cast the defeated Titans into Tartarus, the same abyss where countless prisoners had once suffered. Massive bronze gates sealed the prison. The Centaurs stood guard to ensure that the Titans would never escape. At last, the war was over. The universe had a new ruler. Zeus ascended to power. The heavens belonged to him. The seas were entrusted to Poseidon. The underworld became the realm of Hades. A new age had begun. To many, Zeus was now a hero, the liberator who had freed creation from tyranny, the champion who had defeated the Titans, the savior who brought order to chaos. But history often hides uncomfortable truths. For although Zeus had defeated a tyrant, power has a way of changing those who possess it. And in time, the new king of Olympus would begin to resemble the very ruler he once fought to overthrow. The Titanomachy was over. The old rulers had fallen. The universe finally knew peace. Or so it seemed. Standing atop Olympus, Zeus now possessed more power than any being before him. The heavens answered to his command. Storms gathered at his will. Lightning obeyed his voice. Gods and mortals alike recognized him as the supreme ruler of existence. For many, this was the beginning of a golden age. The tyrant Cronus had been defeated. Justice had prevailed. Order had replaced chaos. But power has a strange effect on those who hold it, especially when that power is absolute. At first, Zeus ruled wisely. He established laws among gods and mortals. He settled disputes. He maintained balance between the forces of the world. The Olympian gods took their places beneath his authority. Everything appeared stable. Yet beneath the surface, something else was growing. The same fear that had consumed Cronus was beginning to take root within Zeus. He had seen how quickly power could be lost. He knew the story of Uranus. He knew the story of Cronus. And deep down, he understood a terrifying truth. If it had happened twice before, it could happen again. One day, someone might rise against him. Someone younger, stronger, more ambitious. Someone capable of taking Olympus for themselves. From that moment forward, Zeus became obsessed with protecting his throne. Ancient myths tell of numerous prophecies warning that his reign could one day come to an end. and each prophecy filled him with growing paranoia. One of the most famous involved the sea goddess Thetis. According to a prophecy, Thetis would give birth to a son greater than his father. When Zeus learned of this prediction, he immediately abandoned any desire to make her his wife. Instead, he arranged for her to marry a mortal king. That child would eventually become Achilles, one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. But what matters is why Zeus made that decision. Not out of kindness, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear that the prophecy might be about him. Fear that another son could rise and overthrow him just as he had overthrown Cronus. Again and again, Zeus acted to eliminate potential threats before they could emerge. The king of Olympus trusted few. Even among the gods, his authority was rarely questioned. And when it was, the consequences could be severe. Over time, Olympus transformed into something more than a kingdom. It became a court centered around one figure, Zeus. Every alliance revolved around him. Every decision required his approval. Every god understood where true power rested. The thunderbolt was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a reminder, a warning. Challenge Zeus, and the sky itself could become your enemy. Many ancient stories portray Zeus as the guardian of justice, and in many cases he was. He punished oath breakers, protected sacred laws, defended hospitality and social order. But justice and fear often walked side by side, and Zeus increasingly relied on both. The ruler who had once liberated the world from tyranny was slowly becoming something different. Not a monster, not yet, but no longer simply a hero. The line between protector and ruler was beginning to blur, and soon, Zeus would demonstrate just how far he was willing to go to preserve his authority. His enemies would suffer, his challengers would be broken, and some of the most terrifying punishments in all of Greek mythology were still to come. Among them was the fate of a Titan who dared to help humanity, a being whose crime was compassion. His name was Prometheus, and Zeus would make him an example for the entire world. Throughout Greek mythology, Zeus was often described as the guardian of justice, the king who maintained order, the protector of divine law. But for those who challenged his authority, justice could become something far more terrifying. Because Zeus did not merely defeat his enemies. He made examples of them. Their suffering was meant to be remembered. Their punishments were designed to send a message, a warning to gods and mortals alike. No one stood above the will of Olympus. And no story demonstrates this more clearly than the fate of Prometheus. Prometheus was not like the other Titans. He was intelligent, compassionate, curious about the future of humanity. According to ancient myths, the first humans lived fragile and difficult lives. They struggled against cold nights, wild beasts, and the darkness that covered the world after sunset. They lacked knowledge. They lacked power. Most importantly, they lacked fire. Fire belonged to the gods, and Zeus intended to keep it that way. To Zeus, fire represented power, civilization, progress. It was a gift humanity had not earned. But Prometheus saw things differently. He looked upon mankind and felt pity. Against the direct command of Zeus, he stole fire from Olympus. Hidden within a hollow stalk, he carried the sacred flame down to earth and delivered it to humanity. For the first time, humans could cook food, forge tools, build civilizations, push back the darkness. It was one of the greatest gifts ever given to mankind, and one of the greatest acts of defiance against Zeus. When the king of Olympus discovered what had happened, his fury was unimaginable. Prometheus had not merely broken a rule. He had challenged Zeus and Olympus as authority. The punishment that followed became one of the most infamous in all mythology. Prometheus was chained to a remote mountain. There, an enormous eagle descended from the sky each day. The bird tore open his body and devoured his liver. Every night, because he was immortal, the organ regenerated. Every morning, the torment began again. Day after day, year after year, century after century, an endless cycle of suffering. His crime had been helping humanity. Yet Zeus wanted the entire world to witness the consequences of disobedience. But Prometheus was not the only victim. Another figure suffered a fate equally terrible. Atlas. During the Titanomachy, Atlas had fought on the side of the Titans. When Zeus emerged victorious, he decided that defeat alone was not enough. Atlas would carry a burden unlike any other. He was condemned to hold up the heavens themselves. Forever. No rest. No relief. No escape. While generations of mortals lived and died, Atlas remained trapped beneath the weight of the sky, a living monument to Zeus and Apos' victory. Then there was Sisyphus, a mortal king renowned for his cunning and deception. Again and again, Sisyphus outwitted gods, kings, and even death itself. His intelligence became legendary, but Zeus saw his actions as an insult to divine authority. For his punishment, Sisyphus was sent to the underworld. There, he was forced to push a massive stone up a steep hill. Every time he neared the summit, the stone rolled back down. Again, and again, and again. For eternity. No reward. No success. No end. The punishment transformed his existence into a symbol of endless futility. As if that were not enough, another story revealed just how merciless divine justice could become. The story of Tantalus. Tantalus enjoyed the favor of the gods. He was welcomed into their company, invited to their feasts, trusted by Olympus itself. But greed and arrogance consumed him. Ancient myths offer different versions of his crime, yet all in the same way. Tantalus betrayed the gods, and Zeus responded with ruthless severity. In the underworld, Tantalus was placed in a pool of clear water beneath branches heavy with fruit. Whenever he reached for the fruit, the branches moved beyond his grasp. Whenever he bent down to drink, the water vanished, surrounded by abundance, unable to touch any of it. Forever hungry, forever thirsty, forever suffering. These punishments were not simply acts of revenge. They were displays of power. Each story carried the same lesson. Challenge Zeus. Defy Olympus. Ignore divine authority, and your fate may become a warning remembered for eternity. To many ancient Greeks, these myths demonstrated the importance of respecting divine law. But viewed through a different lens, they reveal something else. A ruler willing to inflict unimaginable suffering in order to preserve control. A king determined to ensure that no one would ever forget who truly ruled the universe. And yet, despite all these punishments, the greatest controversies surrounding Zeus were not acts of wrath. They were acts of desire. Because the king of Olympus possessed another weakness, one that would create chaos among gods and mortals for generations. His endless pursuit of power was matched only by his endless pursuit of love. For all his power, Zeus possessed one weakness that repeatedly brought turmoil to both gods and mortals: desire. No aspect of Zeus and Apos' character appears more frequently in Greek mythology than his endless pursuit of lovers. Kings feared him. Monsters feared him. Even the gods respected his authority. Yet again and again, Zeus allowed his passions to guide his actions. The result was a collection of stories that have fascinated, shocked, and troubled audiences for thousands of years. Many of these myths begin in a similar way. Zeus sees someone he desires, a mortal woman, a goddess, a nymph, and then he uses his immense power to reach them, often through deception, often through disguise, and almost always with consequences that would echo through generations. One of the most famous examples is the story of Europa. Europa was a Phoenician princess known for her beauty. When Zeus saw her, he became captivated. But rather than approach her openly, he devised a plan. Transforming himself into a magnificent white bull, he appeared among the royal herds near the shore. Unlike the other animals, the bull seemed gentle and calm. Europa approached without fear. Eventually, she climbed onto its back. At that moment, the bull rushed toward the sea, carrying Europa across the waves to the island of Crete. There, Zeus revealed his true identity. Their union would produce several children, including Minos, who would later become one of the most famous kings in Greek mythology. But Europa and Apos' story was only one among many. Another involved a young woman named Io. According to myth, Zeus became fascinated with her beauty. However, there was a problem. His wife, Hera, was already suspicious. Hera knew her husband well. She had witnessed countless betrayals before. Fearing discovery, Zeus transformed Io into a white cow. But the deception failed. Hera demanded the animal as a gift. Unable to refuse without exposing himself, Zeus surrendered Io. The young woman became trapped within a divine conflict she never sought. Her suffering continued through relentless persecution and exile. A recurring pattern emerged. Zeus pursued his desires. Others paid the price. Then there was Leda, one of the most unusual stories in all Greek mythology. Ancient legends claim that Zeus transformed himself into a swan and approached the Spartan queen. From that encounter came children who would become central figures in Greek legend. Among them was Helen, the woman whose beauty would eventually spark the Trojan War. Once again, the actions of Zeus altered the course of history. Even generations later, perhaps one of the most significant stories involved Alcmene, a mortal woman destined to become the mother of a legendary hero. To reach her, Zeus disguised himself as her husband. The deception succeeded, and from their union came Hercules, the greatest hero of Greek mythology, a warrior whose adventures would become famous throughout the ancient world. Yet even the birth of Hercules carried the shadow of Zeus and Olympus' choices, because every new affair deepened Hera and Olympus' anger, and Hera rarely directed her wrath toward Zeus himself. Instead, it often fell upon the women and children connected to him. Many suffered for circumstances beyond their control. The stories became a cycle of desire, jealousy, punishment, and tragedy. From a modern perspective, these myths can be deeply uncomfortable. They raise questions about power, consent, authority, responsibility. Many scholars argue that these stories reveal how ancient societies understood the relationship between gods and mortals. The gods were not perfect moral beings. They were powerful, unpredictable, often driven by the same emotions and flaws that shaped human lives. In this sense, Zeus was not portrayed as a flawless ruler. He was portrayed as a force of nature, capable of greatness, capable of destruction, capable of inspiring devotion and fear at the same time. And perhaps that complexity explains why his stories have survived for so long. The king of Olympus was not simply a symbol of justice. He was a reflection of power itself, magnificent, dangerous, and impossible to fully control. Yet despite all his authority, Zeus never escaped one problem: fear. The fear of rebellion, the fear of losing power, the fear that someone, somewhere, might one day challenge his throne. And that fear extended even to the gods who lived beside him on Olympus. Because behind the celebrations and divine feasts, tensions were growing. Not everyone was willing to accept Zeus and Olympus' rule without question. And when some of the gods dared to oppose him, they discovered just how dangerous the king of Olympus could become. To mortals, Zeus appeared unstoppable, the king of Olympus, master of thunder, the supreme authority among gods and men. But what is perhaps most remarkable is that even the gods who lived beside him often feared him. They celebrated together, shared victories together, ruled the cosmos together. Yet beneath the splendor of Olympus, tensions frequently simmered beneath the surface. Power on such a scale rarely exists without opposition. And Zeus and Olympus' rule was no exception. Many of the Olympians respected him. Some admired him. Others obeyed him simply because they had no choice. For while Zeus was capable of generosity, he was also capable of swift and overwhelming punishment. The thunderbolt remained the ultimate symbol of his authority, a reminder that challenging the king of Olympus carried serious consequences. One of the most famous examples involved a rebellion among the gods themselves. Ancient myths tell of a conspiracy led by Hera, Poseidon, and Athena. Each had their own grievances. Each had grown frustrated with Zeus and Olympus' decisions. Together, they devised a plan to overthrow him. For a brief moment, the impossible seemed within reach. The king of Olympus was caught off guard. The conspirators managed to bind him with powerful chains. The ruler of the cosmos had become a prisoner. It was a shocking reversal. The same fate that had once befallen Uranus. The same fate that had once befallen Cronus. History seemed ready to repeat itself once again. But the rebellion did not succeed. Before the conspirators could secure victory, Zeus was rescued. The giant Briareus, one of the mighty Cinemanes, came to his aid. The chains were broken. The coup collapsed. And Zeus regained control. What followed revealed a great deal about his character. He did not forget, and he did not forgive easily. The rebellion failed, but the lesson remained. Even the gods understood that opposing Zeus was a dangerous gamble. His authority emerged stronger than before. Yet rebellion was not limited to Olympus. Other challenges arose throughout his reign. One of the most terrifying came from Typhon, a monstrous being so powerful that many myths describe him as the greatest threat Zeus ever faced. Typhon was not a titan. He was something far worse. a creature born from ancient forces of chaos. Descriptions vary, but many portray him as a gigantic monster whose body stretched across mountains, whose eyes burned with fire, whose voice echoed with the sounds of countless beasts. When Typhon rose against Olympus, even the gods were terrified. Some legends claim they fled. Others transformed themselves into animals to escape his wrath. Only Zeus remained. The battle that followed shook the world. Thunderbolts filled the sky. Mountains shattered. The earth trembled beneath their conflict. For a time, victory seemed uncertain. But in the end, Zeus prevailed. Typhon was defeated and imprisoned beneath the earth. Once again, Zeus had protected the cosmic order. Once again, he had proven why he ruled. Yet stories like these strengthened an important belief among gods and mortals alike. There was no rival to Zeus. No equal. No challenger capable of standing against him for long. And that reality created a strange paradox. The more powerful Zeus became, the more isolated he became. Others respected him, but they also feared him. They served him, but they rarely trusted him completely. The king of Olympus stood above everyone. Yet standing above everyone often means standing alone. Perhaps that is why so many myths portray Zeus as a ruler constantly watching for threats, constantly listening for prophecies, constantly preparing for challenges that might never come. He had seen what happened to Uranus. He had seen what happened to Cronus. He knew that power could disappear in an instant. And so he held tightly to his throne, tightly enough that some remembered him as a protector. Others remembered him as a tyrant. After all, Zeus was not merely a god. He was a ruler. And rulers are rarely judged by their victories alone. They are judged by how they use their power. Which brings us to the question that has followed Zeus for thousands of years. Was he the guardian of justice who saved the universe from chaos? Or was he simply the latest king in an endless cycle of power, fear, and control? To answer that question, we must look beyond the myths themselves and examine the legacy Zeus left behind. Thousands of years have passed since the temples of ancient Greece stood at the height of their power. The sacrifices have ended. The priests are gone. The great cities that once honored the Olympian gods have faded into history. Yet Zeus remains. His name still echoes across books, films, video games, and popular culture. Few mythological figures have left a greater mark on human imagination. But the question that has followed Zeus for centuries remains unanswered. Who was he truly? A hero? Or a tyrant? The answer depends on where we choose to look. To many ancient Greeks, Zeus represented order itself. Without him, the universe would have remained under the rule of Cronus and the Titans, a world governed by fear and chaos. Zeus defeated those ancient powers. He established laws, maintained balance among the gods, protected sacred customs, punished those who violated divine order. In this view, Zeus was not merely a king. He was the foundation upon which civilization rested, the guardian of cosmic stability, the force that kept the world from descending into disorder. Without Zeus, there would be no Olympus, no divine justice, no protection against the monsters and forces that threatened existence. His victories over Cronus and Typhon alone secured his place among the greatest heroes of mythology. And yet, there is another side to the story, a side that cannot be ignored. The same ruler who protected order often ruled through fear. The same God who punished evil sometimes delivered punishments that seemed far beyond mercy. Prometheus suffered for helping humanity. Atlas carried the heavens for eternity. Countless mortals found themselves trapped in conflicts they never chose. Even the gods themselves feared provoking his anger. Again and again, Zeus acted not only as a protector, but as a ruler determined to preserve his authority at any cost. The line between justice and control became increasingly difficult to distinguish. Perhaps this is why Zeus remains such a fascinating figure. He was never meant to be perfect. Unlike many modern heroes, the gods of Greek mythology were deeply flawed. They were powerful, emotional, jealous, proud, impulsive. In many ways, they reflected the strengths and weaknesses of humanity itself. And Zeus embodied those contradictions more than anyone. He could be wise and reckless, compassionate and cruel, protective and destructive, within the same story, within the same decision. Perhaps the ancient Greeks understood something important. Absolute power does not transform someone into a god. Even a god can struggle with the temptations that come with absolute power. The story of Zeus is not simply the story of a thunder god. It is the story of leadership, of authority, of fear, of responsibility. It is the story of what happens when one individual gains the power to shape the fate of an entire world. And maybe that is why these myths still resonate today. Because while the names have changed, the questions remain the same. How much power is too much power? Can a ruler remain just forever? Does fear create stability, or does it eventually create rebellion? And when a hero gains absolute control, what prevents that hero from becoming the next tyrant? The Greeks never offered a simple answer. Instead, they left us with Zeus, a ruler who saved the universe, a ruler who inspired fear, a king who brought order, a king who often stood one step away from tyranny. Neither completely hero nor completely villain, but something far more human. And perhaps that is why, after thousands of years, the king of Olympus continues to captivate the world. Because in the story of Zeus, we do not simply see a god. We see ourselves. Zeus ruled the skies, commanded thunder, and shaped the fate of gods and mortals alike. But his story reminds us that power is rarely simple. The king of Olympus was a hero to some, a tyrant to others, and perhaps both at the same time. If you enjoyed this journey into the darker side of Greek mythology, be sure to subscribe and join us for future stories from the forgotten worlds of ancient gods and lost civilizations. In our next episode, we and Olympus explore the tragic story of Hades, the ruler of the underworld, a god feared by many, but misunderstood by most. Until then, remember, history may forget, legends never die.